a region of opportunities from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea. 20 years ago, if we were meeting here, we'd be talking about war. This was the eve of the Iraq War 20 years ago, and the blowback from terrible September 11 attacks. 10 years ago, if we met, we would be talking about Arab uprisings, political transitions, lack of certainty. Today, the region is in a different place. Not everything has been sorted out, not everything is rosy, but we can genuinely talk about opportunities that can be fulfilled. The potential of the region has always been there, and yet much of it was lost. At this moment, we see the United States is a little less engaged, even if they profess otherwise. A real energy transition is underway and what it will look like for the region and the world. Regional leadership and alliances formulating and emerging, but also a region that continues to have a war in Yemen, difficulties in Iran, Horn of Africa instability, and key issues related to climate, water, lack of education in too many countries. So it's a mixed picture, but we see the opportunities. And so that's what we're talking about today, in the midst of course, the Ukraine war and the fallout from that war and the global polarization that we see. So I would like to start with Your Excellency, Minister Sameh Shoukry. When we look at this region, of course, the Suez Canal is integral when we talk about the region, Arabian Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, but also Egypt's role as a connector for Africa, Asia, the Arab world. And currently, of course, you are president of COP27. So when you look at this region at a time of opportunity, in this moment of multilateral confusion, let's say, how do you see it, and what can Egypt do to try to simulate and stimulate some of these opportunities at this time?
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be participating, and we are happy that the Middle East takes a prominent role in terms of this dialogue. I think the main issues revolving are the challenges, but again, the potential. And I think the greatest potential of this region is its population. It is a young population. It is one that is striving to integrate into the global structures, whether economic or political, and it continues to show its resilience and its ability to undertake new technologies and to promote its own well-being. Egypt plays a fundamental role because of its strategic position, because of the Suez Canal, which connects the East and the West, and because of its diverse relationships. Egypt is an African country, it's an Arab country, it's a Mediterranean country, it's part of the non-aligned, it's part of the global South, and it does, being the most populous in the region, have the ability to continue to cooperate on this traditional role as a connector between societies and between peoples, and to take full advantage. Over the last 7 years, Egypt has been on a road of development. It has invested heavily in elevating people out of poverty and creating job opportunities, and depending on infrastructure, the dual carriageway of the Suez Canal, I think, is a remarkable achievement in 1 year that has opened the greater doors of connectivity and the ability to impact some of the supply chain difficulties that were associated with the COVID and subsequently. But again, in the realm of renewable energy, our ambitions are unlimited. I think renewable energy has proven its economic viability and its ability to generate greater wealth, and prices have come down as innovation has taken hold, and we are now on the road to having a 42 mix in renewable energies, whether solar or wind, by 2035. So for all these reasons, we believe we can continue to play a very important and positive role in regional integration, in regional cooperation, in finding new areas of economic prosperity, despite the pressures associated with COVID, with the crisis in Ukraine, and the need to direct resources to the achievements that have already been demonstrated and the opportunities that are available.
Now, if we just stop for a moment on the climate issue, because as you said, there's opportunity there, but there's also major challenges, especially for our part of the world, as temperatures continue to rise. When you think about the COP27 moment and trying to calibrate all the momentum that was built around COP, what do you think this region can come out with that can really lead to climate action?
I think COP27 was in itself a defining moment where we were able to maintain the momentum after Glasgow and insulate the multilateral process from the challenges associated with Ukraine. I think we have to highlight the existential threat associated with climate change. And it is very pertinent in our region because of the scarcity of water, the desertification, the rising temperatures, and the associated risks of the impact of climate change when it comes to insecurity and conflict, and making those associations which have previously not taken the front stage. But more importantly is the matter of the just transition and maintaining a sense of practicality where ambition must coincide with the capabilities, and where ambition has to also correspond with the implementation of pledges that have been unfulfilled, and at the same time the necessity to provide finance so that developing countries can undertake the responsibilities. Without finance, there can be limited ambition, and to open the doors of finance, which are recognizably have a potential for a good return, not only as climate action, but even from an economic, from a developmental perspective. We need to reform the international financial institutions, and as well the commitments. It's rather ludicrous that since 2009 and the commitment of the provision of 100 billion, we are still deficient in fulfilling that obligation on the part of the developed world, whereas trillions have been spent on stimulus during COVID and subsequently, of course, on maintaining the conflict in Ukraine. So this is, we have to all recognize as an existential threat that has to be met with determination and a political will and practicality, and that we can't continue to neglect the science and to think that we can raise the ambition while we do everything possible to restrict the ability, especially in the developing world, by when we have recognized the value and the potential of green hydrogen, for example, we see that there is a tendency to provide subsidies in the developed world for the production of green hydrogen, making it uncompetitive for developing countries to be able to rely on this both as a matter of contribution to climate change, but also as a matter to contribution to their developmental objectives. So there are many layers of issues that have to be discussed, and I think the only way forward is to do so in transparency and in reliance that this is an issue that we're all together in, that we can't isolate the interests of one, and we should try to insulate it from the utilization of climate change as a political tool to create more competitiveness in one area at the expense of another.
Minister Hashimy, I'd like to bring you in here because this, of course, climate agenda continues to be important throughout the region, but of course as it comes to the UAE for COP28 and the gathering at the end of November. So when you, I mean, climate finance is a major issue, and it's hard to believe at the time that there is liquidity in the region, but globally there is liquidity, that this remains to be a fundamental challenge. But also how important that is for this energy transition. How does the region position itself in this energy transition as a way of opportunity?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Raisina Dialogue's focus on the Middle East and allowing us the opportunity to discuss matters relevant to our nations and our regions, and certainly a larger collaboration with countries around the world. We're working pretty closely with the Egyptian team, and as my colleague Sameh mentioned, the 4 tracks of any COP have to cover climate finance, mitigation, adaptation, as well as loss and damage, which Egypt managed to pull through in a pretty remarkable way. We've heard in past discussions here at Raisina that the international/multilateral system as a byproduct of the Second World War has been what has kept us as an international community relatively safe. And whereas that may be true, and frankly is true to a large degree, that doesn't mean that we can't improve on existing systems. And here walks in climate finance, but in particular, multi-development banks. You're right to note that there is no shortage of liquidity, but the way in which funds are being allocated to countries that are transitioning or that are in need of capital for development growth hasn't really reformed, if that's the right term to use, over the last few decades. And as challenges percolate and new and emerging threats grow, we need to find a better way to be better. And we need to be more ambitious, because when we really want it, we can do it. Sameh mentioned COVID, COVAX, vaccine development. In less than a year, we had an RNA vaccine. If that says anything, it says if we get our mind around something, we're actually able to deliver on it. That same fervor, ambition needs to find its way in some of the other challenges that we deal with. And if we look at climate, how we can scale technology and innovation to help us deal with a planet that is screaming and telling us that it's just no longer enough for us to continue on business as usual, COP to COP to COP. That's just not going to help us preserve what we need for our families and what we need for the next generation. And we have been seeing earthquakes, typhoons, floods, and droughts in unprecedented scale. We hear now the word apocalyptic. You mentioned in your opening remarks 20 years ago, this is what we would have been talking about. 2010, this is what we would have been talking about. Well, in 2023, we're talking about apocalyptic proportions of the planet rejecting our intervention as a human species. We need to have a significant step change. And it can't only be focused on one angle, which is climate finance. It needs to be across the board. And more countries are saying clearly and unequivocally that business as usual is not enough, and it won't get us anywhere near where we need to go. As the United Arab Emirates prepares to host COP, we're committed to trying to do this differently. We want it to be solution-driven and impact-oriented, where we're bringing in technology and innovation at the very heart of how we want to provide for practical solutions. And we're a nation that believes in partnerships, that is working with everybody on this panel, but probably everybody in the audience and beyond, in developing long-standing, impactful, meaningful partnerships that is also keen on doing things in a stronger, more meaningful way. And so you look at our relationship with India, for example. We signed a CEPA 8 months ago. Our trade is already up 30%. We signed a CEPA with Indonesia. We're finishing up with a few other countries that we will soon make public. What does that tell you about us? It tells you that we believe in the importance of free trade, that we look for new markets, and we look at them in a manner that believes in the fundamentals of how we share this planet for people and for planet in a manner that is also synonymous with an innovation-oriented, technology-respectful mindset. We believe as a human species we're capable of doing anything we set our heart and mind to. It's just getting enough will and enough momentum to bring us onto that path so that we could achieve those results.
But Minister, can I ask you now, here comes the cynical journalist,
What would we do without the cynical journalist?
Indeed. But you know, the cynical journalist will say, but great can-do attitude, great approach of looking at things, but there are some serious problems and there are some serious concerns. One, a lack of cooperation on many of these issues that are cross-border, that won't be solved without it. And so, do you find that this is a moment, the dynamic within the region is actually moving into that greater good moment? And also, even if it is, what about the external dynamics?
So my answer to you would be, what else is new? We know this. This is not a utopian, naive, we can do it if we feel it type of attitude. It is, we're looking straight in the eye of conflict, problems, challenges in our region and beyond, as it has always been. But we choose not to be victims, and we choose to see beyond it, and we choose to unlock the opportunities where they might arise, and we believe that success is contagious. And so you do it enough times, you build out enough momentum, you bring on board enough believers, and yeah, all of these problems will be there, will always be there, but we will be able to overcome it if we have a clear perspective of what our end game is. And if we rally enough believers with us, nothing is insurmountable. You're talking about a nation that 50 years ago, maybe even less, didn't have running water. And is now going to host COP, just finished hosting the World Expo 2020, 10 years ago hosted the International Renewable Energy Agency. This is a nation that is slightly older than I am. And so when I think of, are we ambitious and can we do it? Of course. And is it only the UAE that can do it? Of course not. Oman is doing it. Egypt is doing it. India is doing it. Bangladesh is doing it. We're all doing it in our own tempo, appetite, and manner. We need to work better together. We rely on these forums, but we can't stop the work when these forums are over. We need to keep active and keep an action-oriented mindset. And also, I said it earlier, I'll kind of repeat it again, we need to be more ambitious. And I say this primarily because I leave my children every time I leave for work. And I have to believe that everything I'm doing is somehow going to help them down the line. Otherwise, I wasted their childhood on my work around the world that may not actually reap any benefit for them. I can't live with myself if that ends up happening. And I hope that no one can, because at the end of the day, the sacrifices we make in public office, or as a journalist, or as an entrepreneur, has to amount to a larger, greater good. And that larger, greater good has to be better than what we see today.
So that greater good, that North Star, so that greater good, that North Star, can be the lighthouse in the tempest, because we are living somewhat globally in a tempest. So, Minister Albusaidi, I'd like to turn to you, please. And Minister Hashimy, referenced the dynamic that's happening in the region. That is quite positive, and it's quite something to be having these sorts of conversations where usually we are only talking about the problems and challenges. But the tempest from our part of the world often looks like the US-China dynamic. And Oman's foreign policy is legendary in being able to balance between different interests and different viewpoints. And so I wonder how your vision is for tackling that balance between the US and China and not having to choose a side.
Well, thank you. First of all, may I just echo the words of my colleagues in thanking Raisina for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here in India, and I really think when we talk about this region from the Mediterranean to the Arabian Sea, I would like to stress that we we really have been always throughout history looking east as well as west. So I hope we also mean by defining that region that India is in it. India has so much really capital to offer, and likewise, with connectedness between India and this region is going to be, I think, a game changer in the years to come. Oman, probably informed by its geography, by its history and culture, is a country that has gotten used to being able to work with everybody. In fact, our foreign policy main theme is on the notion of being friends to all. And on that basis, we have acted upon it for more than 4 or 5 decades now, where we have a friend everywhere. So when it comes to the question of China or the United States or anyone else for that matter, really we find ourselves at ease in dealing with both and benefiting from that relationship for the common good. So if there are areas where Oman can facilitate a better dialogue, a better environment for that common good, we never hesitate to do it. We have forged a tradition of a quiet diplomatic sort of approach to things. So I think this has served us well, and the facts speaks for themselves. When you look at Oman now, we really do not have a problem, a political problem at least, with any country on the globe, and we will continue to pursue that policy. I think the logo or the slogan that was chosen for the G20 summit in India speaks it all: one earth, one family, and one future. We need to act upon that and not keep it just as a slogan. And I think this is really the main challenge facing us today. How are we going to translate that into real action?
And when you look at the dynamic that's happening when we talk about, for example, climate or population movements, other cross-border challenges, how do you see this region sitting in the global norms, let's say? There's question marks about the Bretton Woods institutions or other institutions that emerged after the Second World War. We just heard in the morning panel about the commitment to work towards reform of the UN. So how do you see the region being able to shape that change in the global, let's say, multilateral system?
I see a region for the future. I can sense the energy of the young people waiting to be unleashed. We need to empower that more as governments. We need to facilitate that kind of energy. There will always be, as Reem said, problems and challenges. It's a poly-crisis of challenges. And no one country or one region probably can solve it alone. We need to work together. Global South, I think, is going to play a hugely important role in some of these challenges and important problems facing the world. And I really thank India for bringing the Global South to this stage, maybe for the first time in a long time, where we really hear those voices and really influence policy making and make real changes to the way we approach these problems. Our region is the future, it is the present, and when you look at us 50 years ago and now, as Reem just said, I mean, we have transformed enormously. And I think there is still much, much more to be done, especially now when we're talking about the transition from fossil fuel to renewables. I mean, that alone, will provide a huge, huge opportunity for partnerships, for growth, for innovation, will be the key driving force, I think, for this change.
Really quickly, just a quick note, building on Sayyid Badr. In the past, this region, our region, in the Arab world, the African continent, we were a population of consumers. Today, you're seeing innovation happening here in our part of the world. We're no longer waiting for solutions to come in from abroad. We are creating those solutions, and we are making them localized, and we are scaling it. Now, that's not to say we don't need to continuously have strong partnerships with the North, with each other in the Global South, but it is to highlight that the dynamic has changed significantly with increased education and with more technology transfer and more technology accessibility. We are no longer just consumers, we are also part of that solution. And as we look at the challenges that befall all of us as a global community, I think it's important that we all listen to one another a little bit more astutely and a little better, because we could all collectively not only learn a lot, but also manage to emerge a lot stronger as well.
Dr. Sayyid, to build on what we've heard, the dynamic in the region is looking more positive than it has for some time. How does India see that? But also, how do you see the opportunities for the Global South?
Yeah, first and foremost, the whole region of West Asia or MENA region is extremely important globally. It takes care about 60% of the 6% of the world's population, 4% of the GDP, half of the crude oil reserves, and 2/5 of the gas reserves. The population is young and educated, trying to make an impact. It's a competitive region where there are opportunities for manufacturing, tourism, IT, many things. So for India, this region is extremely important on many counts. First and foremost, if you look at MENA region as such, or within MENA, GCC is the largest trading bloc of India. So $154 billion of trade. So if you add include all the other countries, we are talking about $180 billion of our trade with this region alone. So this is very significant. Now, second is energy security. You know that India is a net energy importer, so this region caters to India's requirement, and almost 63% of our energy requirements come from the MENA region. So also it is for the gas. Then the third thing is fertilizers. You know, in the post pandemic as well as Russia-Ukraine conflict, fertilizers, food security has become important, and within that, securing the fertilizers is an important aspect. So here again we look at countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Morocco. So almost $3 billion worth of fertilizers come from this region. Another is that the region looks at India for its own food security. So there are various mechanisms which are happening. Different countries are talking to us in terms of agricultural parks, agricultural SEZs, and all those things. So this is again another thing. Most important for us is the diaspora or the manpower. We have almost close to 8.7 million people working in the GCC alone. So this adds another dynamics to it. So the stability and economic progress of this region is also directly related to India's own economic development. Now, in this context, we have welcomed the ease of tensions in the region. First, in the form of within the GCC, the rapprochement within the GCC during the Alula summit of January 2021. We have also welcomed the two Baghdad conferences of 2021 and 2022. We, of course, acknowledge the role played by Oman. Foreign Minister has just mentioned. Of course, Oman has been playing a very critical role in silently bridging the gap and kind of trying to mediate between adversaries in the region. So this is again something very important. We have come up with SEPA. The minister from UAE has alluded to it. This is a very important development. We just concluded this in 88 days flat, and it covers 97% of our tariff lines. So it has, as she mentioned, it has already started reaping the benefits. we see that in the years to come, our trade with UAE alone would jump from about 75 billion to about $100 billion. So we have resumed the FTA negotiations with GCC. This is again an important thing. Then, together, of course, we have created this framework of I2U2, India, US, UAE, and Israel, and then Negev is also part of it. So there are all these economic groupings which are taking place, and then I see there is a distinct shift now in the thought process of the Arab countries to move away from oil. That is one of the focus of our discussion today. And I see that there is a good ecosystem which has been created for startups, for example. So we have launched Startup Bridge with Qatar, we have launched Startup Bridge with Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. Culture has become an important element, so all these countries are kind of competing with each other to attract tourists, to attract Bollywood to come there for film shooting. So I think this whole region is full of potential, and India would be keenly looking to this region as an extended neighborhood.
So healthy competition, good for everyone. I know we have questions from the floor, so I'd like to open the floor for the young Raisina fellows or Raisina young fellows, if you can go to the mic, please, and then I will take another couple of questions, please.
Hi, good morning. My name is Shai Bialik. I'm from Israel. Thank you very much for this session. It's very inspiring and very hopeful. And I wanted to ask, how do you see, you talked about it in the end of your wording, but how do you see the solidarity and cooperation moving forward with the youth and with using of new sources of energy to provide for better energy and also for one of the main crises we have in the region, which is food security? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if we can take the next question, go ahead.
Africa is a continent, India is a subcontinent, and yours is the magnificent region. Will you please get together and bring dignity to the Palestine? Then the global south can bring the Russians here and solve the problem. We got human resources, we got our culture is that we don't fight unnecessarily. What is the ongoing issue there that you can't do a lot for the Palestinians?
Thank
Madam,
you.
yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Pleasure.
And we'll take a third, and then we'll come back to the panel. Please, the lady standing, yes.
Hi, Your Excellencies. Thank you very much for your very good presentations, and I'm happy to hear that there's so much ambition when it comes to climate change. My question, however, is about another topic, which is what about countries which are maybe currently not in a position to really work with you on mitigation of climate change? More specifically, I was thinking about Iraq and Yemen, and that leads me to the question of what will happen in Yemen.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so gentleman standing there, we'll take your question and then we'll close the questions. Please go ahead.
My name is Mukul. I'm a journalist from Vion. Honorable Foreign Minister of Oman just now emphasized on the motto of G20, One Earth, One Family, One Future. There is a future of incredible uncertainty that millions of Afghan women are facing right now, where they can't go to schools, they can't attend universities. So has the Global South and in extension the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, have they come to terms with the fact that they are now the collateral damage of the US invasion of Afghanistan and the world is letting them be?
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start, actually, the Palestine comment / question for you, Minister Shoukry, because of course Egypt has been instrumental in trying to bring peace and bring a two-state solution to the fore. What stops us from solving this issue?
Well, it's a loaded question, but what stops us from solving it is the lack of a political will, not only on the part of potentially let us say I won't say the participants, because I think there's sufficient political will when it comes to the Palestinian Authority as the representative of Palestinian people. They've been striving for a two-state solution for their rights, their inalienable rights to, as any other nation, have their own state, and they have confined their aspirations and their ambitions to the West Bank and Gaza Strip as being populated by the Palestinian Palestinians still living in what is historic Palestine. We have seen consecutive Israeli governments who have maybe not demonstrated that's the sufficient level of a political will, nor have we seen an international community that has applied a rule-based in the same manner without a double standard to the issue of occupation of lands and the lack of addressing both the political rights of the Palestinians, but their human rights. We see the constant degradation of Palestinian human rights, and we see an international community that does not seem to care. And these are all issues that create a more complex situation. We see a degree of radicalization on both sides because of the lack of light at the end of the tunnel, that extremism is being generated and promoted by a sense of frustration and lack of a credible solution. How do we go beyond that? We have been doing everything possible to highlight the benefits of the resolution of the conflict, the benefits both for Israel, for the Palestinians, for the region in general, the benefits of full integration of all of the states of the region, the potential cooperation that exists, which was demonstrated by Egypt and Jordan early on, now subsequently by the Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, and again, this has I think been hailed as a very important development. But for us to transcend the difficulties and to take the full value of what can be achieved, I think we have to move ahead with the creation of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital and defined by the borders of 1967. The issues have been debated, have been negotiated for decades now, and I think everybody knows the parameters of a fair and equitable solution, and there's an acceptance of Israel living side by side with its Arab neighbors in peace and security, and a recognition of putting in place mechanisms that provide for that security and that credibility for all of the regions. So we see that value. We work for encouraging all to show the political will necessary, and we hope that it will resonate and it will take hold, and we will do everything possible to continue to advocate for a resolution of the conflict.
And Minister Albusaidi, of course, Oman is heavily involved in trying to resolve the Yemen ongoing war. So how do you see that? And I think the question that's posed, that there are countries, be it Yemen, Iraq, and others, that have their own internal problems, which makes them fall behind in tackling the major issues like climate change.
Well, it really saddens me to see this continuous suffering of so many people for so many years as a result of this crisis and the war. They deserve much better. They cannot be ignored. No country really accepts to be in such a position. We have an obligation as their neighbors, as an international community or the regional community, to really bring about an amicable solution to that country. There are a lot of efforts going behind the scene at the moment as we speak to try and bring a resolution to the question of Yemen. Yemen and the Yemeni problem, I always say, needs above all a Yemeni solution, a Yemeni-led solution. And we can really help bring that about, bring all the key players to the negotiating table and forge a roadmap for their future, the way they want to see Yemen transforms, and really be part of this exciting future that we are talking about. They have a lot to contribute. It's a country of great culture and history and pride, and there's so much talent in that country that needs to be galvanized and that needs to be really connected with the rest of us in the region so that the country can really rise up to the challenges that we all face.
Can we be ever so slightly optimistic that that solution is on the horizon for Yemen?
I can be optimistic, of course. There is always a hope and a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are really pursuing that. We are pursuing that every day, in and out, working with our immediate neighbors, working with the international community, with the UN envoy. Really, we have not left one stone unturned to try and find a solution and bring really the notion and to see the wisdom of having a resolution to the problem of Yemen, respecting its sovereignty, respecting its unity and its independence. I think this is it's a key pillars and principles, and we have a Gulf Initiative which is still alive and kicking, and we would like to really make use of all the elements that will help us all eventually and lead us to a resolution to this problem.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time, so we're going to have to close this panel. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to my great panel, and thank you for your attendance.